This is a tutorial video for the AutoPAD software. Today we'll be discussing how to build a simple splitter design, and we'll be using this to explore a few of the key features of this software, such as making different shapes and using different layers and so on. So when we first open up the software, as we see here, we have a very blank screen. We have our center here, which is our editor, where the code of the device will appear and where we can edit it. And on the left, we have a series of panels which allow us to make changes to the code. At the top, we have a new node panel, which lets us create new objects in the device, new shapes, which we can put at different angles and layers from existing shapes. And below that, we have our shape properties panel, which lets us turn shapes into rectangles or circles or into text or polygons as we choose to. And below that, we have a various properties panel, which lets us, configure a few more properties of our shapes, such as their color and their spacing between each other. And it also lets us change some of the global settings of the design, as well as PDF settings for exporting. And then over here, we have our preview window, which is empty right now because we have a blank design. And as we build our design, this preview window will automatically update, and if we make more layers, we'll get a new window for each layer we use. So we can start now by looking at our blank design. We have just a 0 node, which is the origin. In this system, shapes and objects don't have absolute coordinates like XY positions. Instead, they are, it's a parent-child system. So every object is connected to another object, and it has a position relative to that object. So everything starts with the origin node, which is just a blank space, and that everything has a relative position to. So we can make a new node off of the origin and start building our design. We're going to shoot for 3 layers, and we want to make it so that we can deposit liquid in a circle on the top and have it flow down to the middle where it splits off in 2 directions, and then finally goes down to the bottom layer where it can be seen. And this will make more sense as we get into it. So we can start right now by selecting our 0 origin and making a new object. And we can see how this pops up in our editor here, in this bold print object node here. So we can go to our circle tab, and we can make this object into a circle. So all of these dimensions and numbers here are in millimeters by default. So we can choose to make this circle, say a 2.5 millimeter circle. And now we can see in our preview that we've made a circle here that we have selected by our green highlight. However, if we deselect by clicking anywhere else, we can see that we can't see the circle anymore because it's white on white. So one way to solve this is by using a buffer, which is basically a black border that goes around objects. So we can go to our buffer size here, and we can make it a 1 millimeter thick buffer. And when we set this, we see that now our circle has a nice border around it, and it can be seen. And if we print this as wax, this border will become the actual border of the design. So from here, we want to move on to the next layer, because the top layer is just one input zone. So we can go over to our layer box here and put in 1. So we're moving from layer 0 to layer 1. So now when we make a new node here, it'll show up as layer 1 instead. And something to note here is that in the editor, everything is color-coded, so color-coded by layer, rather. So everything on layer 0 will be blue, everything on layer 1 will be red, and so on. And you can edit these colors to your preference or get rid of them if you don't like them in the Preferences menu. So now we can select our new node, and we can turn this one into a circle as well, just by putting in the same parameters that we have here. But maybe we want this one to be 3 millimeters instead of 2.5 in radius. So we can set that and give it a buffer as well, And now we can see our two layers side by side in their separate preview windows. We have our top layer with a thinner circle and our bottom layer with a larger circle. And from here we can start to build out our middle layer of the design. So we want this to split out vertically into two different channels, which come to two other circular zones that will then travel down to the third layer. So in order to do this, we're going to need to make some objects off of this circle at different angles. So in this system, 0 degrees is to the right, and it goes counterclockwise, so 90 degrees is vertical, 180 is to the left, and so on. So we can put in 90 degrees here and make a new node, and we can make this into a rectangular channel by going to our rectangle settings and filling out these length and width parameters. So the length is how far the rectangle travels in its facing direction, and the width is how wide it is in the direction perpendicular to that. So we could shoot for, say, a 6 millimeter long channel that is 2 millimeters wide coming off of this. And we can see that it shows up here. And we can give that a buffer as well, say 1 millimeter on each side. So now we have our rectangle, and off of this we can go ahead and make another object at the same 90-degree angle off of the rectangle now, and make another circle. And say we might want this one to be smaller than the last one. Let's say it's 2 millimeters in radius, and we can set that. Now, something we may notice here as we're going along is that the distance between these two circles isn't actually 6 millimeters. It's because we have a 6 millimeter long rectangle, but it actually goes from the center of each circle to the other center. So if we want to actually make this distance 6 millimeters, we need to increase it somewhat by the radius of each circle. So we need to add one of the circles is 3 millimeters in radius, the other one's 2, so we need to add 5 to it. So we can change this length to 11, and now we should have a good 6 millimeters between these two circles. So now we can go back to our first circle, and now we want to make the other channel going down. So we've selected our first circle, and we're going to make a new object off of it at 270 degrees, and we're going to make this another rectangle with the same dimensions, and we're going to make another object off the end of that rectangle, and we're going to make that another circle. Although actually we're going to make this a 2 millimeter circle like the last one, like that. So now we can see our middle layer of the design, where the liquid will travel down from the top to this middle circle, and then it can travel laterally to these other two smaller circles on the sides. So now what we can do is we can make our final layer. We can select one of the circles on the end, and we can go to our layer box and change it to 2. So this will be our third layer, although it's layer 2 because we started on layer 0. So we can go ahead and hit new here and make another circle on this new layer with the same dimensions, and if we line it up we see that they are aligned in the overall space, and then we can go down to the bottom circle and do the same thing. So now we have the 3 layers of our design: top, middle, and bottom. One more thing we can do. Right now we're using a black border around everything. Another thing we can do is just fill in the background with black, as many people prefer to do. So the way we can do that is by going to our global settings and our buffer box. And these settings are global because no matter where you put them, it doesn't matter because it affects the whole design, rather than just affecting whatever object they're attached to. And we can give it a buffer box just by hitting the Set Buffer Box button here, and that fills in the whole background with black. Now this length and width here is how much extra white space is on the sides of the buffer box, and that's important because when we export this file, it'll come out as a PDF that's tiled automatically to fill a page size. So we can choose how much extra white space we have between designs, because otherwise it'd be all black if we didn't leave any space. So give it a millimeter between each. So now we have our final designs, and we can save and export them. So to save this, we can go to the File Save menu, and we can save it as a text file. So all of these scripts are saved as text files, which can be opened up by the AutoPAD software. And then in order to get the actual images out, we need to go to the Build menu and just hit Run. And these will show up in our output folder, which is in the folder where we're running AutoPAD from. There's a subfolder called Out that the images show up in when we hit Run. And that's the whole tutorial for making a simple splitter. I hope you enjoyed, and for more information, check out our documentation and the other videos which dive into some more advanced features.